Good morning, everyone. This is the Government Operations and Health Facilities Subcommittee of the Health and Government Operations Committee. This is a work session of this subcommittee here on Wednesday, February 7th, 2024. We have two bills we're going to work on today. If you are here for HB 292 related to attorney's fees, or HB 342 referring to prompt payment, we need to do a little bit more work on those offline, and those will come back next week. So today we are going to look at House Bill 289, prohibited provisions, and the House Bill 390, the renaming of the African American Museum. Lindsay, what are we starting with?
Well, that's up to you. House Bill 289 was discussed last week, so it's a holdover. It has one proposed amendment that I circulated, and then House Bill 390 is a new one, but no proposed amendments to discuss.
Okay, let's start with 289 then. I see we have some stakeholders here in the Zoom with us.
So again, as a reminder, this bill prohibits state contracts from including specified provisions that generally restrict the power and rights of the state. If a contract includes a prohibited provision, the provision is void and the contract remains enforceable as if it did not contain that provision. A state contract that includes a prohibited provision is governed by and must be construed in accordance with state law, regardless of any term or condition to the contrary within the contract. The bill applies prospectively only and may not be applied to or interpreted to have any effect on or application to contracts that are executed before the effective date of the bill or to renewals or extensions of those contracts. When we discussed the bill last week, there were no amendments before us. I circulated an amendment via email to everyone that came from the Associated Builders and Contractors Association. And just a quick note, the amendment actually referred to page 1, line 19. That should have been line 21. They wanted to insert after the word state without limitation. So the clause in question would read, that a state contract may not include, one, a provision that requires the state without limitation to indemnify, defend, or hold harmless another person. So that's the proposal from ABC.
Okay, Tommy, I believe that your group initiated this amendment.
Yes, sir. And thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Shalega, for holding this. I did not receive the link last week, and that's why we were not present. But we have spoken with the other stakeholders in this space regarding this amendment. Obviously, they recognize that having unlimited indemnification is certainly not lawful nor beneficial, because there are times where you may want limited indemnification. I do believe they may have presented Lindsay with some other language in regards to that limitation also being appropriated. We don't have any issue with that language, but other than that, I thank the committee. There was other pieces that our group had made note of on their testimony and on their markup, but that was more food for thought for the subcommittee as you went through the evaluation of this bill.
Thank you. Thanks. Jen, can you give me your perspective on the proposed amendment?
Sure, yes. And I had the chance to talk with Mr. Thompson yesterday, so I really appreciate that. No objections to adding the without limitation. We did speak with the Attorney General's office, and we would like to add language on without appropriated funds. I'm trying to pull that language up right now. My colleague, Mr. Rose, might have that as well, because we discussed this. And I think that there was not a concern on the appropriated funds portion, but Mr. Thompson can correct me if I'm wrong.
Skip, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have a chance to talk to Mr. Thompson as this meeting commenced, and I apologize, I forgot to mute the call as I dialed in. We just spoke very briefly as the meeting started. We did propose some language on this amendment last night, which we thought was more technically correct, with the input of the Attorney General's office, so I can submit that language to Ms. Rao if that would be preferable.
Mr. Topset, you in agreement with those negotiations?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it looks like we've reached a consensus here. Do I hear a motion on the proposed amendment? Oh, Delegate Kaiser?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to know that all the smart people on all of this agree, but for those of us not spending all of our days on contracts, could someone explain this in more layman's terms? What is this proposed amendment with amendment doing?
Okay,
I'd be happy to take a shot at that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. What the amendment now says is that in order for an indemnification to be permitted, it requires an appropriation of funds from the legislature, which is a statement of the law and the Maryland Constitution. So it's essentially putting a carve out to our broader language from before, which now says that if there is an appropriation of funds, an indemnification would be permitted.
Delegate Kaiser, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, please do, Lindsay.
So just to clarify, is this rather to replace the language without limitation, that instead of without limitation, it would say without an appropriation of funds?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And I can, if I could find the chat button and the Zoom link, I could post that language.
Okay, well, we'll hear from Delegate Hill while you try and get that sorted. Delegate Hill?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be late. I was in delegation meeting. So I want to be clear on the bill we're doing in the indemnification. The appropriation would mean what? That we're appropriating funds to allow, what are we appropriating the funds? How does the appropriation of funds relate to the indemnification? I'm sorry, Miss, I don't understand. We can only identify if we appropriate funds to do what?
Who wants
To
to?
cover the cost of an indemnification. In other words, if there's a contract, for instance, to perform a service, and in that contract, it requires indemnification for whatever liability might arise, the third parties, et cetera, then if the funds have been appropriated to cover that obligation, then it would be permitted. If there's no appropriation of funds, then the indemnification would not be permitted.
And since we sometimes don't know what the damages are until they actually occur, how do we know how much funds to appropriate to cover the indemnification? I just technically need to know how we do that.
That would come, I believe, post facto. So after the damages are incurred, the legislature would be asked to appropriate funds to cover the amount of the damages.
Okay, so the indemnification is after the fact. In other words, we know there are damages. So this is not like in a contract where we indemnify before we get into the contract.
Correct.
I'm confused because that's typically how I'm thinking about indemnification. It's in the contract that the party is indemnified. And we hope that it doesn't become an issue because they're not going to do anything wrong.
Right.
So if I'm understanding this, we're putting it in the contract. So when are we so we're saying you're indemnified or we're not saying you're indemnified? I'm sorry.
I can take this if you'd like to. What we do now, Delegate Hill, is we say that we can indemnify contingent upon an appropriation of funds by the General Assembly at the time that our obligation to indemnify occurs. So we haven't really had to do this, and in the 11 years I've been here, we've never had to do this. But that does allow us to move forward with signing the contract, but still be in compliance with Section 7237 of the State Finance and Procurement Code, which prohibits us from creating these unfunded liabilities. So it gives our contracting party, it makes them aware that we will take our indemnification obligation seriously and we will go to the General Assembly, but that we cannot usurp the authority of the General Assembly to make the decision on appropriations.
Okay, thank you. Because I was fine with the bill as it came in. This has just confused it a lot for me. Okay, thank you.
Delegate Taveras.
Oh, that was a mistake. I was just
Okay.
mesmerized by Delegate Lopez.
Okay. Is everyone clear on the amendment? Any more questions?
I just had one more question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to clarify. Mr. Thompson, you alluded to perhaps other changes that were discussed. I wanted to clarify if there were any other changes or if this is the only change, like only language change to the bill.
Thank you, Council. This is the only change that we have agreed upon in the bill. So we are not, and I advise the other sides that we're not seeking any other amendments at this time. Yep.
Okay, Lindsay, are you clear where we are? Okay,
Motion to
I,
move the
I just
amendment.
emailed the language to Lindsay.
okay, great, thank you.
Motion to move the amendment.
We have a motion to move the amendment
Second.
and a second. All in favor of adopting the amendment, say aye. Any opposed? Okay,
The
on the
bill is
bill,
amended.
okay, we have a motion on the bill as amended
Second.
and a second. All in favor of the favorable report on the bill as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, is anyone opposed to this bill? Thank you, everyone, for all your work on this. It looks like we're ready to go ahead and make our recommendation to the full committee and probably be seeing this on a voting list Friday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lindsay, next bill?
This bill alters the name of the Banneker, we're on House Bill 390. This bill alters the name of the Banneker Douglas Museum in Annapolis to be the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum under specified provisions of state law governing the Commission on African American History and Culture. And there were no amendments on this one.
Move the bill.
Second.
Okay, the bill's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? On the bill, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to this bill? Okay, it's
Aye.
unanimous. And that concludes our work today, correct, Lindsay? Okay, thank you, everyone. I will see you on the floor shortly and in committee later this afternoon. This ends our meeting.